Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to review the Packers' Week 17 loss to the Minnesota Vikings. The final was 27-25 at US Bank Stadium, Wes, but you know and I know that, quite frankly, this game was not as close as the final score. The Packers made a run at it in the back half of the fourth quarter. They did not give up in this game, but for a good portion of the game, they were down multiple scores, and the Vikings were in control of the game. And I think Matt LaFleur said it best on Monday when he went to the podium, and he basically just accused the Packers of playing sloppy football. And you play sloppy football against good teams, and it's going to be really, really hard to win, and that's what the Packers found out on Sunday.
Yeah, and I just look at that beginning of it, and I thought the approach was right. We saw what happened in Detroit when they deferred on the kickoff. This time they decided to take it. You try to take the crowd out of it, almost maybe replicate these fast starts they had in back-to-back games where they were able to get 2 touchdowns off their first 2 series. And honestly, they're moving the ball a little bit, but then Josh Jacobs has the fumble.
Right.
Credit to the Packers defense. They actually keep the Vikings off the board. They actually earn another punt on the next series as well. I can't remember if it was exactly 3 now, but they got off the field again in the situation. And Green Bay plays pretty much a scoreless first quarter with Minnesota until the Brandon McManus, the drive stalls in the red zone. McManus gets the 22-yarder. And then after that, it was off to the races. It just seemed like the Vikings were able to get into a rhythm. I think the Packers took a pretty big hit with the Zane Anderson loss. You're kind of expecting that he once again is going to be back there with Xavier McKinney, a veteran that has been in this league for a number of years now, even if he hasn't played as much. A couple dominoes fell a couple different directions. A couple penalties went a couple different ways, and obviously the offense didn't start fast enough, and the Green Bay Packers picked up their 4th loss in the NFC North.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of disappointment on both sides of the ball with how this game went. Defensively, I agree with you entirely on what happened with Zane Anderson. He gets injured on the kickoff right after the McManus field goal when the Packers are up 3-0. He leaves for concussion evaluation, and you wouldn't think, okay, you lose Zane Anderson, who was just filling in at safety anyway, right? You wouldn't think that would be a big issue. But when the Packers are down Jair Alexander and Evan Williams in the secondary, and Javon Bullard had just come back from being out for 2 weeks, he was limited in practice with the ankle injury, and you and I both suspect that the vast majority, if not all of his snaps, the limited snaps he did get in practice, were at the nickel position.
Right.
Because Anderson was going to be the other deep safety with McKinney. So, as you said, the dominoes start to fall then because Bullard moves back to safety, which is a position he hadn't practiced really at all, on top of being out for the last 2 games. And then Keyshawn Nixon then has to start bouncing between the slot corner and the boundary corner based on what defensive package the Packers are in. And quite frankly, that domino effect in the secondary had a big impact on the defense. Sam Darnold ends up 33 for 43, a career-high 377 yards. And it was a combination of a lot of things. There were times the coverage didn't hold up. There were a lot of times that the pass rush just didn't affect Darnold enough. It became, once the Vikings got going offensively, it sort of became this snowball that started to go downhill. And the fact that the Packers were really stifling Minnesota's running game to a great degree just didn't matter because they could not get Sam Darnold out of his rhythm.
100%. And a couple different things to touch on here. One, I want to just very quickly mention the safety situation because you laid it out perfectly. Zane Anderson, he's only been in there. He only had started 1 game.
Right.
But then you kind of think about what Eric Wilson has done at inside linebacker when you lose Quay Walker at 2 different intervals of the season, and you have a guy that you can turn to on the bench that has played 8 years in the National Football League, has been a starter before, and can become the key communicator at the linebacker position and kind of keep all the chess pieces lined up appropriately. It's kind of like that on the back end, too, where you're thinking you're going to go in with a certain game plan. We saw Xavier McKinney blitzing from a free safety role, I think, on the second series. Those are the type of things that you can do when you have the reps, you have the camaraderie, you have the trust, and then suddenly Bullard's being, in addition to coming back from injury, now being forced to play a position that he likely didn't practice. To your point, though, about where things headed for Green Bay in the first half, I agree with you. It seemed like early on they were able to get some pressure on Darnold, nearly took him down on a couple different occasions, but then somewhere in that second quarter into the third quarter, there were too many times where he is standing back there and there is nothing around him, and he has all that time to survey the field. I thought they were really smart. I liked what Kevin O'Connell drew up. Obviously, when you have those type of weapons with Jalen Naylor also as a third option, how many times you and I talked last week, I never even brought up Naylor's name.
Right.
He ends up catching I believe it was a 31-yard post. That, for the touchdown, that kind of got things rolling. Justin Jefferson didn't really hurt them for a majority of this game, but then heated up towards the end of it. It was sort of like what you were discussing last week, where he had a bunch of catches, but not a lot of yards early on. And then Jordan Addison is just a difference maker. Matt LaFleur said it. I mean, they have two bona fide number one receivers, and I thought both those guys played like it. And then the last thing I will say, the Packers did an excellent job against the run in this game. Aaron Jones really wasn't too much of a factor. The backs behind him really didn't factor in that much. What I will say, though, is Aaron Jones did a tremendous job in pass protection. They tried the Edgerrin Cooper blitzes. They tried the stunts, the games, the twists, and Minnesota was really stood up well to it. I think that was another thing that kind of contributed to the time that Darnold had to work with.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting at with, everything with the defense was the combination of the rush and coverage, because statistically, Darnold has 43 pass attempts. He's only sacked once. Carl Brooks got him late in the first half. Only 4 quarterback hits by the Packers pass rush in 43 pass attempts. That is certainly not good enough. When you look at the film, and if from our vantage point up in the corner of the end zone at US Bank Stadium, not something that I noticed during the game, but when you look at the film, the Vikings kept a running back and sometimes also a tight end in pass protection a lot of times at the snap.
Yep.
They were in a max protect type of scenario where you've got 6 or 7 guys in pass protection, at least initially, before somebody might leak out. That's gonna make it really hard for a 4 or even a 5-man rush to get home. The problem was that in those instances, the Vikings then only have 3 or 4 guys out into the pattern against at least 6 or 7 pass defenders, but Darnold was still finding holes and still getting completions. So that's why I say I don't want to put it all on the pass rush, because there was only 1 sack in 43 dropbacks. But by the same token, you can't, it's not just all on the coverage, because the Vikings didn't max protect every single time. And what really I saw happening a lot of times with the 4-man rush was one guy would get some penetration or get possibly an angle to try to disrupt Darnold. But when only one guy is getting there, there's all these spaces for Darnold to step into, step up, step this way, step that way, because nobody else was winning the rush. If only one guy wins on his rush and doesn't get a clean hit at the quarterback, all he has to do is take a step or two one way or another, and then he's still got a throwing lane to get rid of the ball. So it was just this combination of things where there weren't enough guys getting pressure on Darnold, and then when the Vikings were making sure there wouldn't be any pressure on Darnold, the coverage wasn't holding up when the Packers should have had the advantage in the back end. And the injury certainly happened, but the expectation is for the Packers to be able to play better than that, and quite frankly, this was just Sam Darnold's day.
Yeah, and to kind of work off of what we were talking with Carrington Valentine in the locker room afterwards, and Carrington, credit to him, did get a third quarter interception, his second pick in 3 weeks.
That was a huge play because the Packers were down 20-3 at the time. They're looking close to being dead in the water, and Valentine gets that interception. Fortunately, Carl Brooks recovers the fumble at the end of the return. The Packers take it in for a touchdown, and not a lot has gone right, but it's a 10-point game, and hope was not lost at that point.
Well, and even as Xavier McKinney said afterwards when I was talking with them in the locker room, those are the plays they're going to need. Whether it's from Valentine or other guys, they need to take the ball away. That's the identity of this defense. That's stuff that they're going to need to build upon going into the postseason. But the reason I bring up the Carrington bit is because, as he mentioned when he was being asked about some of the things that happened with the passing game, he said, their quarterback gets paid too. Like, Sam Darnold is a very good quarterback. And by the way, the Packers, if they can make a postseason run here, are going to face some very good quarterbacks. You have to solve them. But I just want to say, and I think I said this after the Week 4 game too, the search is over. Sam Darnold is the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. I don't want to hear J.J. McCarthy's name anymore. You want to keep him on ice for 3 years, keep him on ice. You want to trade him, you can trade him. Do whatever you want. If you are foolish enough to let that guy out of the building, it would be the biggest thing positively that you could do for Detroit, Green Bay, and Chicago. Sam Darnold, the way that he performed at the end of last season with San Francisco and what he's shown this year with Minnesota, that's your guy. Now, the Packers need to find some answers for him. As we talked about, whether it was Final Thoughts or some of our other content last week, they didn't do a good enough job pressuring him. Matt LaFleur said that himself. But Sam Darnold made some big throws in this game, and it's why this Minnesota Vikings were able to outlast Green Bay.
Yeah. The one bright spot I would say on defense is we saw rookie linebacker Edgerrin Cooper play 71 of 72 snaps.
It's happening.
Which was a major increase in his workload. We talked about, Edgerrin Cooper is going to become an every down defender in this defense at some point. We don't know when. Well, it was this week. The Packers went that direction. He was out there for all but one snap. And he was an impact player. 10 tackles, 4 of them behind the line of scrimmage. He was an absolute terror in the running game, with regard to shutting down the Vikings running backs. As you mentioned, Aaron Jones was, as usual, a stud in pass protection and was a big reason that Edgerrin Cooper was not involved in any of the pass rush stats whatsoever. Matt LaFleur said, this is the first time Edgerrin Cooper, really played a full game. There were some ups and downs. There were certainly some plays that he would like to have back, probably some assignments he missed or didn't play as well as he should have. But you certainly saw the impact that he can have over the course of a full game when he's out there. That is definitely something that this defense is going to build on, and we will see if he ends up getting paired with Quay Walker here potentially in the playoffs, if Walker can get back from his injury.
If Edgerrin Cooper's good, the hamstring's behind him, it's go time.
Yeah.
The Packers are playing for all these games matter. Matt LaFleur said it himself. Their goal from here on out is to win every game. And before Packer fans jump on that saying, well, it should have been that way from the beginning. No. He's looking at it as win every game or your season's over. You have to build momentum against Chicago. You can't go into the playoffs with a loss against Chicago, the first loss of the Matt LaFleur era. You can't go into whether it's Philadelphia or Los Angeles or I think maybe even potentially Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
You can't go through any of those scenarios and be flat. Not if you're expecting to win that game and then go on next week to face a team like Minnesota or Detroit. So put all that out there. Edgerrin Cooper, I think defensively, this guy has become not only a playmaker, but one of the top guys on that side of the ball. He is one of the guys now that opposing offenses are having to scheme up against and plan for. That's what you want. And that's what they're getting out of their rookie second-round pick, and it's exciting to see.
Yeah, well, on the offensive side of the ball, it was a tough slog. The bottom line was through 3.5 quarters, Jordan Love had 64 passing yards. Until those 2 touchdown drives late in the fourth quarter where he threw for 121 yards. Packers score the 2 touchdowns to get within 2 points, have the chance to get the stop at the end and get the ball back one more time. That doesn't happen. But you mentioned the fumble by Josh Jacobs. There were a couple of procedure penalties that took away some significant plays. There were a couple of throws are off, a couple of passes that could have been caught, might have been dropped. I think the biggest one, the fourth down when the Packers were in field goal range in the second quarter. I believe it was 4th and 3, 4th and 2, something like that. Matt LaFleur decides to play it aggressively. He just said he had a gut feeling on the play that he had called. They decided to go for it. A field goal would have made it 7-6. They're going to play for the touchdown there. And unfortunately, Jordan Love's throws a little bit off. Jaden Reed gets his hands on it, trying to dive for it, but can't bring it in. A throw that could have been better, a ball that still could have been caught. The bottom line is the play was there and it wasn't made. And yeah, you can parse the decision and everything all that you want, but that was sort of a microcosm in a lot of ways to me of the first 3+ quarters of this game, is that there were plays to be made against this Vikings defense.
Yep.
And the Packers didn't make them. And that was that was the consummate example of it right there.
And the thing that probably is the most frustrating of all, Green Bay ran the ball well against the second-ranked run defense in the National Football League. They did not particularly run the ball well in that first matchup, although to be fair to them, they fell behind big early. I felt like they controlled the line of scrimmage. Unfortunately, the Josh Jacobs fumble kind of set the tone for some stuff. Jacobs himself said afterwards, it's going to be hard for me to sleep tonight. He prides himself on being able to start. When they get off to fast starts, Josh Jacobs wears that as a badge of honor.
Absolutely.
When you look at the yards from scrimmage he's put together this year, I think it's 400 yards games from scrimmage in the first half this season. He wanted to do that again in Minnesota. He wanted to take the crowd out if they weren't able to do it. It was more than Josh Jacobs, though. As you said, the situation there on the fourth down, Love could throw a better ball. Reed could catch it. Somebody needs to make a play.
Right.
That's the name of the game.
Yep.
Who is making your plays? And Green Bay just didn't have enough of that in this. I love the scheme. I love the defense that Minnesota has put together. It's multiple. It's versatile. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of veterans. I think this is the second oldest team in the National Football League entering the season behind Miami. But they play still very fast, very smart. And I think Brian Flores mixed up his stuff too, that wasn't the same carbon copy game plan as that first one where they were really teasing the safeties, blitzing, and getting guys, 8-9 guys on the line of scrimmage. They played two shell a lot more in this game, naturally, from the base look, and Green Bay had a hard time answering it. Losing Christian Watson was a big deal. I think you and I both agreed going into this that was going to be a big deal because it's not just what he does catching the ball, it's how he sets other things up. But if you don't have Christian Watson, somebody else needs to become that playmaker. Last year in Minnesota, it was Bo Melton, 105 receiving yards, a touchdown, first 100-yard game of the season in that instant for the Packers receivers. That kind of got them going throughout the playoffs. Who's going to be that guy that takes that baton in this game? It just didn't happen. I will say this. I won't say, well, didn't happen. I thought Tucker Kraft gave some really good reps. I thought when the offense was firing, when it looked explosive, Tucker Kraft had a hand in that, but there just wasn't enough of it.
I think partly what we're seeing here, and I remember having, when I've done off-season interviews for yearbook stories and things like that, times that I've talked to Matt LaFleur, even going back to times that I talked with Mike McCarthy when he was here. Matt LaFleur's comment after the game that the Vikings played way more man-to-man coverage than the Packers anticipated. It brought me back to comments that I've heard in the past when Aaron Rodgers was here, that teams would break their own profile on defense to shake things up against a good quarterback like Jordan Love. The Detroit Lions didn't do that. The Detroit Lions, they line up and play man.
They do this,
and that's what they do. That's what they're doing. That's Dan Campbell's philosophy. That's how Aaron Glenn calls it. But the Vikings threw a changeup at the Packers. They threw more man coverage at Green Bay than had been their profile, and the Packers struggled to adjust to it. And that's something that, those adjustments in a lot of ways became seamless when, your four-time MVP Aaron Rodgers, he can make that adjustment by the middle of the first quarter. Certainly by the end of the first quarter, he's going to get a beat on things. Jordan Love is still in his second year as a starter. A changeup like that gets thrown at the offense, and you've got still a bunch of young receivers and whatnot. I'm not trying to make excuses for the Packers. I'm trying to explain, quite frankly, when a defense does that and changes its profile, it's a measure of respect for what they believe you might be able to do against them, and they feel like they have to change things in order to disrupt you. Credit to Brian Flores and the Vikings, it worked because the Packers did not adjust well to what they had planned for coming into the game, and it wasn't until very late in the game when the Vikings had a 3-score lead. They're certainly playing the clock more so than they're playing the opponent, and then Jordan Love got into a rhythm, and that relaxed approach in some ways almost bit the Vikings, because if they don't get the first down in the last 2 minutes, Jordan Love is on fire, and he's got one more opportunity, needing only a field goal to escape that game with a huge comeback victory. But the Packers, it's a lesson learned for the Packers in that you have to be ready for opponents to maybe throw some changeups at you, and you have to figure out how to adjust to it sooner so that it doesn't take this long for what is a very dangerous offense to find its footing and to get going.
Yeah, and the other thing is Green Bay's got to be its own. They got to bring its own juice sometimes too, offensively. As we talked about with the Carrington Valentine interception, it seemed like that changed everything. The offense flowed a little bit better. They got those adversity points, right? They punched in with Josh Jacobs' touchdown run. And it just seemed like after that, they were untouchable a little bit. But before that, it was trying to find an answer and trying to find first downs, and they just couldn't get there. And again, there's so many things that go into that, but making those adjustments, making those corrections are really pivotal. And I will say this too, just to tie into the end of that game there, because it miraculously, Green Bay they get the 2-point conversion with the pass to Dobbs. They get, within 2 points.
The touchdown to Malik Heath.
Malik Heath with the touchdown on Malik Heath.
Right.
And Minnesota gets the ball back with Green Bay having all 3 timeouts and the north side of the 2-minute warning.
Right.
The one part that was frustrating for me, a Minnesota running game that was just obsolete all afternoon, with maybe the exception of one Aaron Jones run.
There was one run by Cam Akers.
That
got out of the gate.
Yes.
But basically, one run by Jones, one run by Akers. Other than that, Minnesota could not run the ball.
And yet Minnesota still runs a play action. They get the 13-yard pass to Ham. They don't. It's not a true play action. It was more of a rollout on the pass that ended up going to Akers.
Yeah.
But it's like those things are so frustrating because it's like you've already proven, well, one, you don't have to sell out for it. And in Minnesota's case, it's like you're really going to set up play action after you haven't run the ball all day. But they got away with it, and they got the win.
Well, and really, when on all of the throws, those last 4 plays where they got the 2 first downs, one on the plus side of the 2-minute warning, and then the second one that sealed the game, Darnold was on the move in the pocket, which from a play calling perspective is really smart, because then if the throw isn't there, he can just tuck it and run and slide and make the Packers use their timeouts, right? You can't count on being able to do that if you're standing in the pocket. And so Kevin O'Connell got him on. He's not a mobile quarterback by any means, but he got him on the move to give him that option. And then the third down, and credit Cam Akers. It wasn't a great throw on the final 3rd and 3. Akers makes a really difficult catch, falling down backwards, grabs it off his shoe tops. Those are the kind of catches that, some of those the Packers let get away in this game, and Akers makes it at the end.
Oh, and in that one too, it's like then he's uncovered. So it's like,
exactly. There was nobody there to make it a more difficult catch for him. The other concerning thing, of course, on the offense is that we saw the pre-snap penalties and things like that. Just this, it's been part of the roller coaster with this offense all season, right? It's like they crop up for a while, then it seems like they go away, then all of a sudden they come back again. That's what Matt LaFleur was talking about in some respects with the sloppy football comment, just really frustrating. And it was especially damaging right at the end of the first half, because the Packers have the ball. There's under 2 minutes left in the first half, and they have a 3rd and 1. And then that's where I believe it's Dontavian Wicks gets called for illegal formation. Matt LaFleur totally disagreed with the call. He felt Tucker Kraft had come off the line and had checked with the official on that. Dontavian Wicks had stepped up onto the line of scrimmage, but they threw the flag for illegal formation anyway. That put the Packers, instead of 3rd and 1, it's 3rd and 6. They end up punting, and then Minnesota gets one more crack to score before halftime, which then they get a second crack at the field goal because of the offside call on Edger and Cooper, get 5 yards closer, and Reichard hits the field goal. A lot of controversy there. The Packers and Matt LaFleur certainly did not agree with either of those pre-snap penalties, but again, a microcosm in some ways of things that have gone wrong in games earlier this season. That's very frustrating to see that stuff crop up in late December when you're hoping to have put that stuff behind you.
It was tough. And again, Matt LaFleur will always say you never want to put it in the officials' hands. Right. I will say, Carl Schaefer's and, who's the, Mike Carr was the down judge too. I've never seen a crew perseverate more over the line of scrimmage than they did in this game. And by the way, it happened to Minnesota too. Yeah. It wasn't just Green Bay. But it was just a very bizarre sequence. And certainly at the end of the first half, I know I have Viking fans all over me on Twitter about this too, but and I think you pointed out right. There was probably just a little bit too much movement, a little bit too much forward motion from Edgerrin. But I also don't think the officials really knew where the line of scrimmage was based on how people were lined up.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get at. Because, as you know, I don't participate much in social media, but I do read it. And I was reading that because you were kind of going back and forth with.
Still am, evidently.
But I was reading through that, and I apologize for not remembering this individual's name, but it's somebody associated with Cheesehead TV who made a response to one of your comments. And then when I look back at the film, this makes a lot of sense to me. It doesn't excuse it in terms of the call, but what I want to explain is when you look at that line of scrimmage view of the field goal, it looks like the right guard for Minnesota is too far forward. He's the one who's actually offside, lined up in the neutral zone. What I wonder about, and this is a plausible explanation, the side judge who threw the flag on Cooper on
Nathan Jones
side of the field, on the Packers side of the field, maybe he thought, based on his view down the line of scrimmage, that the right guard was actually the center.
Yeah.
Which, the way everybody's packed in on a field goal and whatnot, and you're standing that far away, with a look down the line of scrimmage, that's plausible to me. And if he thinks that Vikings right guard is the center and not a right guard who is lined up offside, then I can understand why he thinks Edgerrin Cooper ends up lined up offside. It doesn't excuse it to me. It's poor officiating if that's the case. But I think that's actually a somewhat plausible explanation for how that flag gets thrown when you look at how everybody was lined up and where the flag came from.
When does the flag need to be thrown, though? That's what I'm curious about. Because if you watch the All-22, and again, I have to say it, it's almost like the field goal is missed before the flag comes out.
Oh, really? I didn't notice that part of it.
Let's go back and watch this afterwards.
Okay.
But I mean, it's not like the ball was snapped and the flag comes out. I don't believe that's how that went down.
Because if you're saying a guy is lined up, offside, or if he jumped the snap,
yes,
then absolutely the flag should be coming out immediately.
Yeah, I don't.
It should be coming out.
Let me go back and look, and if I'm wrong, I'll correct myself on Thursday. Yeah. But to me, that was the other thing. It seemed like the kick was missed, and then now I'm seeing a flag. And by the way, there's an advantage to that because Will Reichert ended up getting another try at that kick, in addition to it being 5 yards closer. The Mason Crosby thing just rings in my head all the time with this stuff now. These guys, that is gold to kickers to be able to have an extra shot at these things.
No doubt.
So, again, it is what it is. We all move forward. It's not like the Packers were just being absolute world beaters at that time and that broke up their momentum. They had opportunities well before that. They had opportunities after that.
Yep, agreed. Agreed.
It's just my diatribe I went on Twitter, and I ultimately ended up deleting this because what's the point? But these aw shucks penalties happen all the time. And it may not be Green Bay. It may end up being Minnesota. It could end up being Detroit. The Vikings, they've had stuff happen to them before in the past. Somebody's going to get eliminated from the postseason on one of these things.
Yeah.
And then we will all be like, oh, darn it. And the talk shows will discuss it the following day. A month will pass. 2 months will pass. And everybody forgets that it ever happened. But next fall, when we come back and nothing changes, these are the things that ultimately end up bubbling back up to the surface.
Yeah. I apologize for the long explanation and perseverating on that. I just wanted to point out that the individual from Cheesehead TV, whose name unfortunately I cannot remember, he posited to me the what I think is the best explanation for how that call happened, because I was completely baffled as to how the flag gets thrown there until I saw what.
It was Bruce Irons. Bruce Irons.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, he said that the Vikings being offside so bad made it look like the Packers were offsides.
Yeah, and
by the way, all this could be saved if we would go back to the Dean Blandino era of like the NFL officiating just explaining why calls are made.
Yeah,
but we don't get that anymore.
Right
now, you can't even interview these guys after the game. If you ask for an actual interview, the pool reporter, you're talking to the league office now. You're not even talking to the official anymore. So it's like, we are so far past the Rubicon at this point.
All right. Well, I do have to take care of some sponsor business here. So SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousins Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousins Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right, before we go, we will just review where the Packers are in terms of the playoff scenarios. The 5 seed is out of reach with the loss to the Vikings. The Packers sitting at 11-5, trying to get to 12-5, facing the Bears here in Week 18. If the Packers win, and if Washington loses to Dallas, the Packers will have the 6 seed. If Washington defeats Dallas, the Packers will be the 7, regardless of what happens against the Chicago.
And both of those games are at the same time on Sunday.
Both games are noon Central Time kickoffs. And refresh my memory, the Washington-Dallas game is being played where? Because I don't recall.
It's being played in Dallas, Mike.
It's being played in Dallas. So
I eventually got there.
Okay. So Mike McCarthy, the former Packers head coach, can help out his old team potentially if the Cowboys can beat the Commanders. But so it's either the 6 or the 7 seed for the Packers, and we all know that if it's the 7 seed, then the opening playoff opponent would be the Philadelphia Eagles because they are locked into the 2 seed in the NFC. Obviously, the big game in the NFC coming up is the one for the 1 seed in the first round bye. It will be the last regular season game of 2024/25. Sunday Night Football, Week 18, will be the Vikings at the Lions. The winner, the stakes here are incredible, Wes, for a game that's not do or die. But the stakes are the winner is the 1 seed, and the loser is the 5 seed and having to go on the road in the first round of the playoff.
And the first ever 14-win wildcard team, which is going to happen when you have 17 games now, but still. 14 wins.
It might be a while before we have a 15-win wildcard team again, though. That
might happen in the North again next year too. We'll see.
Yeah, who knows? We'll see. That's pretty unusual, though. But that's the big one in the NFC. It's for the 1 seed and the first round bye for the NFC North Championship. All that. The loser will drop to the 5. The Packers will get either the 6 or the 7, depending on what they do and what Washington does against Dallas. So that's how the scenarios are setting up here for Week 8.
So I was supposed to go to Vegas. Well, I did go to Vegas, but my intention with going to Vegas in June was I was going to see the Conor McGregor fight, right?
Okay.
And a bunch of stuff happened. Conor ends up pulling out of it. They have to save the card. So there's this guy named Alex Pereira, who you won't know, but he's the light heavyweight champion of the UFC. He steps up. And he decides on 3 weeks notice, 4 weeks notice, he's going to defend his title against the guy that he beat. And it's like a big headliner for this pay-per-view. That's what the Minnesota Vikings and Detroit Lions did for the NFL in Week 18. There is no main event this week. There is one spot even up for grabs in this as far as the entire playoffs are concerned, in or out, and those teams don't even play each other.
Yeah.
So you have Minnesota and Detroit. They come down to the wire here. The most improbable scenario possible of 2 14-win teams competing for a division title and the number 1 seed in the playoffs, and it completely bails the league out from, I think probably otherwise it would have been Kansas City. If the Packers win, right, and San Francisco does what it does, and there's no meaning behind Detroit, Minnesota,
right,
I'm guessing they probably flip Minnesota and Detroit, keep that at 325, and probably have Kansas City and Denver.
Yeah, because in the whole AFC thing to determine the final spot, Denver is the one in control. If the Broncos win, they get in. If the Broncos lose to Kansas City,
and Carson Wentz as the quarterback.
Yeah. If the Broncos lose to Kansas City, then it opens the door for either the Miami Dolphins or the Cincinnati Bengals to take the final spot. I agree with you. I think that's what they would have done. They would have had Cincinnati's already playing on Saturday. Yep. They have Miami play on Sunday, and then those teams have to sit and wait and see what happens with Denver on Sunday night. But the league got the Lions-Vikings game, so that's what's there. And it'll be interesting to see, because, as I said, the loser of the Lions-Vikings game is going to go to the 5 seed, is going to be going on the road in the wild card game, going on the road coming off of a Sunday night game in Week 18. I wonder if whatever wild card game that loser is involved in is automatically going to be the one on Monday night.
I think it probably
wild card weekend, just in terms of the kickoff times and kind of trying to even out the rest and whatnot, because you're certainly not going to put that wild card game on Saturday.
Right.
The loser of the Sunday night game,
Packers
having to play on Saturday. But I think that might end up being the Monday night, the final of the 6 wild card games. The loser of the Lions-Vikings game will be in that one. That's just my guess.
Well, and then it is interesting too, because we were hoping, the league was hoping probably for some more drama there with the NFC West. That gets completely sorted out because of how the dominoes fell. The Rams end up clinching, even though
Arizona was 6 yards away.
Yeah,
6 yards away on Saturday night from winning that game against the Rams and setting up a winner-take-all NFC West showdown between the Rams and the Seahawks. Instead, the ball hits off, I think it was off McBride's helmet, and the defender makes a diving interception in the end zone, saves the game for the Rams. and then the tiebreaker ends up getting clinched on Sunday. So the Rams against the Seahawks is not for the NFC West title. The Seahawks have been eliminated, and it only impacts the potential seeding for the Rams.
We got to go. I know you got an 11 o'clock a.m. lunch date here, but we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but isn't it funny how the timeout thing came into play again on Sunday Night Football as well, where I'm telling you, man, like there used to be that rule, like what was it, like under 8 or something in like Domofsky always said, you never go for 2 unless it's under 8. That was like an old standard.
Yeah.
If we were to create a new standard, if you have a pass play that generates over 15, 20 yards, you call the timeout immediately.
Exactly. That and coaches used to do that. I mean, it used to be almost automatic that they would do that because they knew how much time it would take because of the ball being that much further downfield to get everybody lined up, whether it's to spike it or to try to run another play, whatever the case might be. And I mean, Atlanta taking not even using their last timeout and having to try a 56-yard field goal
with your backup kicker,
with
Riley Patterson.
It was unbelievable. As soon as Drake London caught that ball, and I mean, I was thinking all he had to do was fall backwards and fall out of bounds. He didn't get out of bounds. But then as soon as you see the referee signaling to wind the clock, they had 2 timeouts.
Yeah.
You should have had a first down with 30 seconds left and still 1 timeout to go as you're almost to midfield there. And instead they don't even get the next snap off until there are 17 seconds left and you're still sitting with 2 timeouts. Like it made no sense. And you're right. We're seeing the clock management across the league now getting poorer and poorer.
Crazy.
Because there's actually a question that I saw in Insider Inbox that I'm going to answer for tomorrow. It's almost as though coaches are getting way too obsessed with not leaving a single second on the clock in an end of game scenario. That even, because of Patrick Mahomes having enough timeouts to get a field goal against Buffalo in the playoffs with 13 seconds on the clock, it's like you can't leave any time. Well, if the other team doesn't have any timeouts or only has 1 timeout left, leaving 10 seconds on the clock is not the end of the world. Like, do what you need to do to get your team in the best position. The field position there is more important than what is on the clock, and not burning a timeout that probably, quite frankly, it probably cost Atlanta the NFC South title.
100%.
Because they had it. It was a tremendous final drive by Michael Penix Jr., the rookie quarterback, 2 fourth down conversions, including the one for the touchdown. And then they blow the clock management and probably the division championship just based on not using a timeout.
You've got to help your rookie quarterback that has been a starting quarterback for 2. This is not prime 2014 Aaron Rodgers. This is a guy that is extremely talented, has second NFL start, and he's been playing NFL regular season football for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you don't give him the time out there. I mean,
unbelievable.
I might have been able to understand this if it was Matt LaFleur calling the offense and he's got whatever. Raheem Morris is a defensive-minded coach. I mean, yes, he has a very eclectic background as far as coaching, but like, it's not like he's sitting there trying to figure out what the next play is. Like, it just, I don't get it.
Yeah. I think Atlanta cost itself a division championship by not calling a timeout, and it's pretty amazing.
It was right after your defense just got an amazing stop of Jaden Daniels to get that opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah, Jaden Daniels becomes the hero in overtime. Nobody's talking about the fact that they went 3 and out with the opportunity to win the game and gave the Falcons the opportunity to win the game in regulation on the road. But last thing with regard to the Packers playoff scenarios, because I didn't mention this, if the Packers were to get the 6th seed, they could play either the Rams or the Buccaneers, depending on how those games, the Rams are playing the Seahawks, the Buccaneers are playing the Saints. So if it's the 7, it's the Eagles. If it's the 6, it could be one of 2 opponents, Los Angeles or Tampa Bay. So I just wanted to clear that up. And last but not least, the countdown to the 2025 NFL Draft has begun. Green Bay is hosting this year, in case you didn't know that, and you won't want to miss it. So mark your calendars for April 24th through April 26th of 2025 and visit greenbay.com/draft25 for more information. We've gone way overtime. We apologize, especially to our producer, Zach, but he'll deal with it. And For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Happy New Year, and we'll see you next time.